It sounds like Hailie Deegan may no longer be driving for AM Racing going forward, and Shane Van Gisbergen is hoping to join the Cup Series in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. First, going to talk about the Grand Park 165, as it was reported by Trey Ryan after Jeff Gluck asked a question that the Chicago Cup race earlier this evening is the shortest Cup race in distance since 1992 at Watkins Glen, when Kyle Petty won, which I believe is 124.6 miles. This race tonight was 127.6 miles, which is the shortest distance since 1992. Alex Bowman went on to go get the victory earlier this evening. Congratulations to Alex Bowman on getting it done. Crazy, this race only under 130 miles. Very, very short race. One of the shortest distance we've seen. I think that race in 1992 was obviously a rain-shortened race as well. Nonetheless, congratulations to Alex Bowman on winning the shortest Cup race in distance in nearly 32 years. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Shane Van Gisbergen, according to reports, is the first driver to win 3 NASCAR Xfinity Series races in 2024. This is the latest in a season for Xfinity since 1991. If you would have told me that Shane Van Gisbergen would have been the first driver to have 3 wins in an Xfinity Series season in 2024, I probably would have laughed at you, because you could have got drivers like Chandler Smith and Austin Hill and AJ Allmendinger, and even guys like Ty Gibbs and John Hunter Nemechek, who've all almost won races or have won races this year. The fact that Shane Van Gisbergen currently has the most wins in Xfinity so far is honestly really impressive and pretty surreal, to be honest. It's honestly crazy and pretty wild, and nonetheless, congratulations to Shane Van Gisbergen on being the first driver to have 3 wins in the season for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about JD Motorsports, as it once again was reported by Trey Ryan that both JD Motorsports cars failed to make the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Chicago Street Course. This is the first race that both JD Motorsports cars have missed since Charlotte in Xfinity in 2007 in the May race during Memorial Day weekend. That is absolutely crazy. JD Motorsports, we all know, has been kind of struggling over the course of the last few years, and we know this team was under some controversy not too long ago. Maybe JD Motorsports should focus a lot more on their performance instead of kind of worrying about what's going on in social media. They've been struggling. The field has been a lot more competitive than this team. They've been failing to make races this year. I think they've had almost half the races where at least one of their cars has missed this year, unfortunately. Going forward, they need to focus on trying to make races instead of figuring out what's going on social media. Hope they can do that going forward, because let's be real and honest, they have not done a good job in certain aspects, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about ARCA West. Now, if you watched the ARCA West race this past weekend, I believe at Kern County or another track out there, you saw the ARCA West promoter who was calling the winner of the race, Sean Hingorani. You saw them get very frustrated and very upset at the 15 team and the organization. He basically sounded on the hot mic the F word, was really frustrated about it, and then went over to interview Jack Wood and basically tried to call him the winner. Now, I saw this and I was completely shocked about this. I've never seen a track promoter get this mad and upset. Now, the thing to note about this track promoter is Tim Huddleston. Tim Huddleston owns Kern County and a couple other racetracks on the West Coast. Tim Huddleston's son is Trevor Huddleston, who I believe finished in the top 5 in this race. Now, Trevor Huddleston is not liked by a lot of people in the ARCA West from what I understand, and Tim Huddleston has also got a little bit of a temper as well. It's very interesting to look at this for sure. I wonder if they do go back to Kern County or some of these tracks going forward, if they're going to basically call them off or something, as is Irwindale, but I wonder if we're going to see some things come along with this, maybe some penalties. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Nonetheless, very interesting for sure. Kind of crazy stuff. The end of the ARCA race was wild. It's kind of crazy. Sean Hingorani went on the win. Sean doesn't have the greatest reputation. I was a little surprised and shocked to see the reputation of these guys, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the F1 movie. As the F1 movie has been officially announced for the summer of 2025. The movie is going to be called, of course, Formula One. This movie, of course, is starring Brad Pitt. This kind of follows a similar storyline maybe to Days of Thunder, if I'm not mistaken. The creators of Days of Thunder, of course, are creating this movie. They were looking to release this movie this year, but things kind of changed with funding, among other things. It's going to start off at the Rolex 24s. They did a bunch of filming there, and I think there's also going to be some footage from some of the Grand Prix from earlier this year. I don't like the title name, to be honest, of the movie. I really hope it does good, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a big fan of the name of the movie. Again, don't get me wrong, I like the fact that they are going to be coming out with this movie. It'll be on Apple for next year. I think it will be in theaters, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully it can be a really, really good movie. So I want to see a really good F1 movie, because F1, the racing hasn't been as great, even though it's been recently pretty good. But hopefully the movie can be good. Hopefully it can be really, really awesome. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the IndyCar races Mid-Ohio. Before the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course, you had the IndyCar race at Mid-Ohio. For the early portion of the race, Alex Palou completely dominated. He had the fastest car by a mile. But once he got on the red tires, Pat O'Ward really started making up a ton of ground. And unfortunately, Alex Palou had a terrible and a really bad pit stop, and Pat O'Ward was able to take advantage. But one thing we continue to notice is that Alex Palou was really, really good on the black tires. It was making up a ton of ground and inroads at the end of the race, and it turned into a pretty solid ending to the race. Alex Palou was about 2/10 back coming to the end, and he tried everything to get around him, but it would not be enough. And coming out the final corner, Pat O'Ward picks up technically his second win of the 2024 season, his first win coming across the line, because remember, he got the win after Joseph Newgarden was DQ'd at St. Petersburg. Congratulations to Pat O'Ward. It's been a long time coming. This team was really fast. It was really close with Alex Palou. It's a big win for this team. McLaren had a big weekend overall. Congratulations once again to Pat O'Ward on winning the IndyCar race, the Honda 200 at Mid-Ohio. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the British Grand Prix. Now, before the IndyCar race, you also had the British Grand Prix. And this race is very compelling and interesting. Early in this race, George Russell dominated early, but eventually once the pit stop started going out, Lando Norris was able to take control of this race. But it got very compelling. You started having guys get on the red or the inners, and you of course had some guys staying out a little bit longer and being there, kind of like how the Cup race was a little bit. And eventually it became a battle between Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris, and even Max Verstappen, who was coming hard, charging on the harder tires and was running down Lewis, and actually got around Lando Norris for second. Lando had a pretty bad pit stop, lost some ground, and Lewis Hamilton was able to take the advantage to get to the race lead. Max Verstappen got up to second and tried everything to get up to them, but it would not be enough. And coming out the final corner, and for the first time since 2021 at Saudi Arabia, Lewis Hamilton has won his first Formula One race since 2021. Congratulations, Lewis Hamilton, a well-deserved win in victory. He earned this win. It was a big win for this team. He's been close to winning at times. He was very emotional. You never know when it's going to be your last win. This could be the last time he wins in Formula One ever, and his last win with Mercedes. Once again, congratulations, Lewis Hamilton. He earned this one. He earned my respect today. Congratulations, Lewis Hamilton, on picking up the win. A well-deserved win overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson and SVG. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Chicago Street Course, you saw a heads-up battle in Stage 1 and Stage 2 between Kyle Larson and Shane Van Gisbergen. Both those drivers were going back and forth for the lead the whole entire first stage. You had Kyle Larson get the lead early. Then you had Shane battle back to the outside. They were switching back and forth throughout the whole entire first couple of stages. They were giving themselves thumbs up and each other thumbs up, and they were racing each other very respectfully and very cleanly. No contact. It was very clean. It was extremely respectful. Unfortunately, after some adjustments and getting trapped back in traffic, there wasn't enough time for Kyle Larson to get up to SVG. But Shane Van Gisbergen, of course, went on to win. And we saw Kyle Larson show a lot of respect to Shane Van Gisbergen throughout this race. I said this for a long time. Kyle Larson and SVG are two of the best race car drivers on this planet. I know Kyle Larson in the Cup race made a pretty big mistake, and unfortunately SVG's chance to win the Cup race went away after Chase Briscoe made a mistake. But both these drivers race each other very hard, but but very, very clean. And that's what I want to see. I want to see these drivers race really respectfully and also race really clean, where they're not taking each other out going for the win. That's all I want to see. I want to see the best racing out there, and I think both those drivers put on a show, and it made for a really awesome Xfinity Series race. I thought the race scenario was perfect. I think NASCAR's got some procedure things they've got to do, but at the same token, same time, it was a very, very fun race between these two guys. They put on a hell of a show. It was amazing. It was an amazing battle, and I thought it was a great battle between Kyle Larson and SVG, but once again, congratulations to Shane Van Gisbergen on picking up the win. I think he absolutely earned it overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson and Tyler Mott. Now, if you remember what happened at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, you saw the radio communication between Kyle Larson and Tyler Mott. Obviously, Tyler Mott basically told off Kyle Larson for not racing Denny Hamlin aggressively, for running him over really quickly, and Kyle Larson then basically told Tyler, shut the F up. Now, Kyle Larson spoke on this situation. He said they're both good about that, and they were laughing about what happened at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Honestly, it's kind of interesting to look at for sure, right? Kyle Larson and Tyler Mott basically know each other. They've been together for a while. Obviously, Tyler spotted for Kyle Larson at the Indy 500. And basically, I think what Tyler was trying to do was trying to help Kyle Larson get a little more aggressive against Denny. We obviously know that both of them haven't raced each other with respect. Well, basically, Denny's raced Kyle Larson, not the greatest out there. But if any time Denny Hamlin gets raced by anybody, he'll sometimes complain about it, even though Denny, I think, is a really respectful driver at times as well. To me, it's really good to see that Kyle Larson and Tyler Mott are not mad at each other about what happened. I think basically it's just good to see sometimes. They're going to have these radio communications where sometimes both of the people working at the team are going to go off right. Sometimes it's just going to happen. I'm glad to see both Larson and Tyler Mott are still on the same page. They're still going to be working together. They don't have to be separated. And I'm glad to see, like I said, that both of them will get to continue working together going forward, because I think both of them do work together well, and they're really, really good working together. And I hope they do get to stay long term, because I think Tyler Mott's a really good spotter, and I think both of them need to continue working together going forward. We don't need to separate them, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. Now, Carson Hocevar was being catched up by the media this past weekend at the Chicago Street Course and spoke about what happened at Nashville Super Speedway. Carson Hocevar says he respects NASCAR's decision to go ahead and penalize him for what happened at Nashville, but he says he didn't intend to turn Harrison Burton. Ryan Blaney also spoke on the situation. He said this kid has done this multiple different times, and he doesn't have a lot of respect in the garage. I'm going to be real and honest. He said basically about the SMT data, said if NASCAR looked at the SMT data, that basically they would see that Harrison Burton probably brake checked them going down the back straightaway. Look, we all know what happened. Carson Hocevar intentionally wrecked Harrison Burton under caution. He received a $50,000 fine and a 25-point penalty, which hurt him in the pocketbook and also hurt his chances of potentially winning the Rookie of the Year honors. So he did get help a little bit with a pretty decent performance at Chicago. But let's be real and frank. I think NASCAR made the right call here, and I don't think that NASCAR had a choice but to penalize Carson Hocevar. This was not the first time that Carson Hocevar has done something really dumb and completely stupid out on the racetrack. He's raced really stupidly at times. He's wrecked himself on purpose under yellow to try to draw a caution for fuel, among other reasons, and he's just done things in the past that are extremely questionable. And I think NASCAR, like I said, made the right call to go ahead and penalize him. This sent a message to him, and I really hope it did, because if Carson get a message sent by NASCAR and can learn from this, I think he'd become a really great driver. Carson's got a lot of talent, but the garage doesn't respect him because of some of the stupid things that he's done on the racetrack. So I really hope, like I said, that he can learn from this mistake, move on from it, and can start racing a lot more respectfully as well, because some of the things he's done has just inexcusable and uncalled for. And personally, I wasn't a fan of some of the stuff he did. He needs to learn from this and not do stuff like this going forward. I really hope he can definitely learn about it, because trust me, I think Carson Hocevar is really talented, but drivers in the industry are not going to respect him if he continues to do stuff like this going forward. He has to learn from this, and I hope he doesn't make another mistake like this going forward into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about stage breaks. Now, every time we go to a road course in Cup, Xfinity, or Trucks, there's always a question about whether or not stage breaks should be on road courses. Remember, last year, there were no stage cautions on road courses last season, and generally races were pretty clean. Now, Michael McDowell and Tyler Reddick, who were basically in the media center after the Cup Series race at Chicago, they both are advocating they want stage yellows to be gone at road courses. They liked it before where stage cautions weren't a thing and the races flowed out naturally. I 1000% agree with Michael McDowell and Tyler Reddick on this. I get that NASCAR wants to have entertainment, but bringing stage yellows back I thought was one of the worst decisions they made. I get last year kind of doing it at the Roval because you kind of wanted the playoffs all to be the same, but the fact that they brought it back I thought was just completely inexcusable on NASCAR's end. And I think had they basically gone ahead and not had those stage yellows, I think NASCAR gets all 75 laps in. Let me explain. There was a 25-minute caution for what happened with Corey LaJoie. Had NASCAR let that play out naturally, they absolutely could have finished this race. They ran it under yellow, and then that stage 2 caution was also completely unnecessary. That's another 10 minutes. You add up those 35 minutes, that's 15 extra laps right there that NASCAR could have gotten in. And I get rain would have been a factor. Again, also NASCAR should probably start these races a little bit earlier. Kind of said that in the race review earlier this evening. I want stage cautions gone at road courses. If they can find a way to do that, I think that would be a fantastic and great decision. Will NASCAR do that? I'm not entirely sure, but like I said, I really hope NASCAR is thinking about it. We have drivers advocating for it, and I really hope that NASCAR listens to what the drivers are saying, and I really hope and strongly recommend that NASCAR goes ahead and gets rid of stage cautions at road courses because I think they're really hurting the flow of these races, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez versus Chase Elliott. Now, I don't think NBC caught this after the race, but if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race and you saw some of the confrontation on social media, Daniel Suarez and Chase Elliott went after the race to talk to each other. And we all were kind of wondering what had happened between both of these drivers. Well, there's video that surfaced came out from NASCAR.com and Toby Christie as well on Twitter. They basically posted that on the last lap of the race, Daniel Suarez had gotten hit by Chase Elliott going in the second to last corner. Well, Chase Elliott went right back behind Daniel Suarez and completely turned Chase Elliott, got completely turned by Daniel Suarez in the final corner, dropping Chase Elliott 21st. This is also significant because it's the first time this season that Chase Elliott has failed to finish outside of the top 20. Had that incident not happened, we would have seen Chase Elliott get another top 20, having 20 straight top 20 finishes. But because of this incident, that took Chase Elliott out of chance to get that done. Personally, I feel like that Daniel Suarez really did nothing wrong here. I get he got in the back of Chase Elliott, and obviously Chase Elliott fans are not going to be happy about this because Daniel Suarez does have a win. Chase does have a win also this year. But let's be real and frank and honest. Chase initiated the contact there. He got in the back of Daniel Suarez and completely turned him there. And I think Daniel Suarez had every right to be frustrated and upset with Chase Elliott about that. Again, and it seemed like that both of them are probably not going to have any issues going forward because once they all talked to each other, they both ended up calming down, which is, I think, something we kind of want to see. There's a lot of carnage and a lot of drivers pissed off after the race. We got another driver we're going to talk about is pissed off here in just a little bit. But to me, in my personal, honest opinion, I think Daniel Suarez had every right to be frustrated with Chase a little bit there, and also think Chase could maybe have had a little bit of a right to be frustrated at Suarez for basically intentionally wrecking him at the end of the race. But I don't think there's any penalties coming for this. It's just incident at the end. Sometimes stuff like this is going to happen. What you're going to do is just racing hard at the end of the race. We're both looking for the best position they can get, especially for a playoff spot in points as well. Nonetheless, my personal opinion is that I don't think that Chase Elliott was initially a fault. Well, I think Chase was initially a fault, and I think that Daniel Suarez ended the contact a little bit. Very interesting for sure, nonetheless, and kind of crazy to see that both those guys were mad at each other after the race, but I'm also not shocked about that overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Dillon. There's been a lot of talks and rumors and rumblings and conversations about whether or not Noah Gragson could potentially be going over to Richard Childress Racing. I mention that because many people speculated that Austin Dillon was going to retire at the end of this season and Noah Gragson was going to take over to see. But Austin Dillon spoke to Daniel Trotta from SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, and he says he still has 2 more years that he'll be in the 3-car going forward. And he also said that Kyle Busch is committed to the process as well. He did reveal, however, that RCR is planning to make some executive changes and make some competition changes going forward to really help fix their organization. Obviously, like I mentioned and said a second ago, there have been rumors, speculation about Noah Gragson going over to RCR. But we do know that RCR is expected maybe to only be 2 cars. There was talk about him getting a 3rd charter for Noah Gragson, which is why these rumors began to start. Look, let's be real and honest here. Austin Dillon, over the last year and a half, has generally struggled. He had a crew chief change. Keith Rodden been his crew chief for the last year and a half. They brought Justin Alexander back this year, and let's be real and frank and honest, there has not been really much improvement so far from that 3 car this season. And we all know Kyle Busch has been doing a lot better, despite the fact that Kyle Busch has also been struggling at times, and Kyle Busch was really frustrated about the lack of performance recently going into this weekend. I think Austin Dillon really needs to improve, but Austin Dillon isn't that bad of a driver. I'm just going to be real here. Austin Dillon isn't the greatest driver in the world, but he's made the plus like 6 or 7 of like the 10 or 11 seasons he's been in the NASCAR Cup Series. I know the last couple years have not gone well, but I think overall it's maybe an RCR issue more than just a Austin Dillon issue. RCR's got a lot of kinks they really need to work out, and I really hope they can work them out going forward. The big question is going to be, will Austin Dillon maybe back out of working in the driving role and maybe in the future go in executive role? I think if I'm Austin Dillon, I would be going ahead and backing out of that kind of role where he's the driver and going to more of an executive role to try to fix the program. Will he do that? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, if he's going to do that, but it would be a very smart and wise business decision if he decided to go ahead and do that. So we'll see if he in the future decides to go ahead and back out of that. Is he going to? I don't know, but I think as of right now, Austin Dillon is, at least for the foreseeable future, is going to end up staying in the number 3 car. He needs to get better, don't get me wrong, but I really hope he can get better because I do want to see Austin Dillon get better for the team and RCR to get better as well, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch. Now, Breakard, a fellow YouTuber, is also part of the Daily Downforce, put out a very interesting tweet. He was, I think, at the Chevy Vanzo, if I'm not mistaken, at Chicago, and basically Shane Van Gisbergen was asked about the potential rumors of Kyle Larson maybe being interested in running a supercar race, because we already talked about how well Kyle Larson and SVG ran well together. Well, he also kind of confirmed something very interesting, that being SVG, that both Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch could be running supercar races against each other and SVG at the Adelaide 500 after the season concludes. There's been a lot of rumors and chatter and speculation recently that Kyle Busch is one of the drivers that's interested in going over and racing in supercars. According to reports, AAA Engineering is involved. We know Red Bull, of course, being a major sponsor of AAA Engineering. They're heavily involved in this process of potentially happening. While it's not been officially announced, things are being worked on. We know that Erebus Racing have been the original organization that they have been looking at to go to, but I think Erebus have been having a falling out as a racing maybe with RCR, which is why we've been seeing Will Brown going over and make his NASCAR Cup Series debut a few weeks ago at Sonoma, and we could see Will Brown make a return here in the not-so-distant future. I really would love to see both Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch, and maybe someone like a Connor Zilic as well, go over race supercars. We've been seeing some of the guys from supercars come over race in NASCAR. SVG is starting to have a pretty successful NASCAR career. Obviously, other guys like Will Brown and Cam Waters and Brody Kosecki. Maybe Brock Feeney in the future could come over, and Chaz Mostert could come over and race as well. I would love to see some of the other NASCAR guys, like I said, though, Connor Zilic, also come over and run in supercars as well. I think it'd be very fun and really, really awesome. Will it happen? Who knows at this point? The rumor speculation do continue. I think it is going to happen at some point for sure, where we see both these guys go over and race during the offseason, because it's the only race they really can run, which is the Adelaide 500, which is kind of like an exhibition event, I think, for supercars. I really hope it ends up happening, because I think it'd be really good. I hope both Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch can go ahead and run over and do some supercar racing during the offseason. I think it'd be good for the sport, and I think NASCAR could definitely support it if it ends up happening. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rodney Childers. As Josh Berry was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, I believe on Thursday or Friday, and Josh Berry says that they are planning to have Rodney Childers be meeting with the Wood brothers. Initially, there have been rumors, speculation that Ronnie Childers was not going to be going over to the Wood Brothers to crew chief for Josh Berry in 2025. Remember, it was announced about a week ago on Wednesday that Josh Berry would be officially joining the Wood Brothers starting in the 2025 season. Initially, we've been hearing reports that Brian Wilson, who's a current crew chief for Gisbergen in the Cup Series, was going to be the crew chief for that 21 car for Josh Berry. But it sounds like they may be looking outside to go after Ronnie Childers. If I'm the Wood Brothers and Ronnie Childers has the opportunity to go over there, I'm bringing him in, not just into the Wood Brothers stable, but the Team Penske stable as well. Ronnie Childers, I think, is probably the biggest asset free agent that's currently left on the free agent market. Look what he did for the careers of drivers like Brian Vickers and Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick got extremely good at the end of his career, really the second half, because he had Ronnie Childers with him there. I think Ronnie Childers is one of the best crew chiefs we have seen, and he's made Josh Berry look amazing. If you put Ronnie Childers as a crew chief for Josh Berry next year, I think both Josh Berry and Ronnie Childers are going to have a better chance and opportunity to make the playoffs. I don't think Brian Wilson is a bad crew chief, or actually Jeremy Bowen's been the crew chief, my apologies. He's been the crew chief recently, and Jeremy's a good crew chief, don't get me wrong, because he's won races with Ryan Blaney, not just in the 21 car, but the 12. But I think that Ronnie Childers is one of the greatest crew chiefs we've seen in NASCAR Cup Series history, especially as of recently. So if you break those two up, I think that would be overall a really bad and a pretty poor judgment move on their part. Are they going to do it? I don't know. Who knows at this point? But again, I think the smart decision, if you're that team, you bring Ronnie Childers to work with Josh Berry next season and have him as your crew chief. That's the best thing they could do. It'd be a smart business decision to make. I really hope the Wood Brothers make the right decision. I hope it's the right call. And like I said, I truly hope and pray that Ronnie Childers can truly end up being the crew chief for Josh Berry next year, because I think he absolutely has earned the right and deserves to be the crew chief for Josh Berry once again in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace and Alex Bowman. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Chicago Street Course, which I suspect many of you did, you saw what happened in the NASCAR Cup Series race happen on the cool-down lap. Remember, Alex Bowman went on to go and win the race. But the reason now Bubba Wallace was frustrated with Alex Bowman after the race is what happened in the middle portion. The restart, when they basically went on the wet weather tires after a 25-minute caution, we went on the wet weather tires. And Bubba Wallace was having a very solid and strong run at the Chicago Street Course for his standards. And Alex Bowman, who really couldn't see, I think he said his windshield wipers were broken at the time, he ran in the back of Bubba Wallace and spun Bubba Wallace out, and Daniel Suarez was collected in the incident as well. And then we saw the frustration from Bubba, where he was not happy about it. He said basically killed our race. Now, Bubba, we all thought was going to be out of the race altogether, but that was not the case, and Bubba was still able to continue. Once Alex Bowman went to victory lane and won the race as they're coming down the cool-down lap, Bubba Wallace was very frustrated at Alex Bowman and sideswiped him into the outside wall, and he got a little bit of damage. Now, Alex Bowman didn't spoke after the race won. He basically first said he was happy to win, but he also wanted to apologize to Bubba for what happened in that situation, basically apologizing for the incident on the racetrack and what took Bubba out of contention. Now, Bubba came back and finished 13th, which I think is really impressive because he was in the back of the pack with like 20 laps to go and came back to finish 13th, which I think is really, really impressive. Now, according to Bob Pockers, NASCAR is planning to go ahead and review what happened from the incident and wreck. They are going to look at what happened and see what decisions they need to make. Now, Alex Bowman said in his post-race winning conference that Bubba should not be penalized for what happened on the racetrack. And I 100% agree with Alex Bowman. Look, I understand that people are going to be upset, and Bubba Wallace is a very polarizing driver, especially what happened not long ago with the Eric Almirola incident. But my personal opinion is that Bubba Wallace should not receive a penalty. This is not the first time that we've seen a driver do this, where they sideswipe somebody or got in the back of somebody and wrecked them after the race had ended. Look what happened at Richmond with Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. went on a rampage after the race because he was really frustrated and upset, and NASCAR never penalized Martin Truex Jr. for that. If they were to penalize Bubba Wallace for what happened in this situation, I think that would be a bad judgment call by NASCAR. And I really hope they make the right judgment call here where they don't go ahead and penalize Bubba. The worst thing they probably should do is maybe give him a fine, but that's it, because Martin Truex Jr. got nothing. So I really hope NASCAR does make the right decision. But we all know NASCAR can also be very inconsistent with the decisions they make. But again, I really strongly recommend that NASCAR makes the right decision, because you're going to have a lot of fans on both sides that are going to be really upset regardless of what ends up happening. So we'll see if there's any penalties coming out. But like I already mentioned and said, I really hope NASCAR makes the right decision. We know they're not historically great at making good decisions, but let's hope they make the right decision, because like I said, I don't think bubble walls should be penalized, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series schedule. As SVP of NASCAR Ben Kennedy was on Sirius and NASCAR Radio speaking to Daniel Trotta, and he spoke about the fact that the 2025 NASCAR schedule is very close and will be released very soon. And he says that Chicago Street Course is expected to once again return to the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series schedule. There's been a lot of chatter about the schedule being released over the course of the last few months. We originally were supposed to get a release on the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series schedule all the way back in late May, going into early June. But it seems like every week or so, it keeps getting pushed back. But from what I've been hearing and some of the conversations some people have been having, it sounds like the schedule, I think Dorval McClure talked about, is that the schedule could be coming sometime this week. Whether that's on Tuesday or Wednesday, that is still undetermined at this point. But what some people are saying is the schedule is probably going to be coming on Tuesday. This is absolutely huge. This will be one of the earliest times that the NASCAR schedule has been officially released. Here's what we know at this point. The Daytona 500 is going to be February 16th. We are expecting that they're not going to have a spring Richmond date. We're probably going to Mexico City. There have been talk about going to Montreal as well, but it sounds like Mexico City is going to be getting a cup date. They're probably going to go to the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track. Phoenix is going to host a championship finale. Homestead is expected to move to middle of March, what Jordan Bianchi reported on. Bowman Gray is expected to host a Clash. We will not be in the Los Angeles area in 2025. We'll not be going to the LA Coliseum once again next season. Daytona once again will host a regular season finale. We are expecting that Gateway and New Hampshire, and I think another tracker is going. I think Darlington is going back in the playoffs as well. There's also expected to be a couple more big changes. We know Atlanta is going to be the first race on TNT. According to what Ben Kennedy had said, those other changes, a lot of the big changes to the schedule and the shakeups are coming because of what happened with TNT and Amazon coming in. And they wanted to make some big changes for the schedule going forward. I'm really intrigued to see what the schedule is going to look like for 2025. Again, we know some of the things that are coming. We know some new tracks are being added, and we know some tracks are there. There's been rumors even Rockingham potentially coming back, which, by the way, I don't think Rockingham is coming back in the schedule, but I could be entirely wrong. There's a lot of expected changes to be coming really, really soon. And again, we're going to know that here very, very soon, it sounds like. Going back talking about Chicago, I want the Chicago Street Course back on the schedule as well, by the way. I think the event up until the Cup race was going extremely well. From what I heard, the concerts are really good, and also the Xfinity race was a complete banger. And I, like I said, hope Chicago can be back on the schedule once again. I know we all want Chicagoland to come back, and trust me, I want Chicagoland to be back on the schedule as well as many of you do, but at the same token, same time, the Chicago Street Course is really big for this market, and I truly hope that Chicago Street Course, I think it'd be cool if both can exist next year, but I really hope for sure the Chicago Street Course can make a comeback in 2025. So we'll see what ends up happening, but it does sound like that we're going to be knowing about the 2025 schedule here in the not-so-distant future, and the city of Chicago will make a decision about the future of the Street Course very soon as well. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the EV prototype. As NASCAR finally has officially unveiled its first EV prototype, an ABB that has a big prototype partnership with the Formula E Series. They are going to be the main sponsor of this prototype going forward. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about an EV prototype coming out. We know there's been a lot of conversations that Dana White is really heavily involved in. According to what we've been seeing, some of the images have been surfacing. Dana White was at the Chicago Street Course this week, and it was in the Chicago area. There's a rumor speculation that this EV prototype is going to be run in the new electric series that is going to be coming forward. Now, this needs to be made clear. A lot of people, when they see the word electric and they see electric NASCAR, many people are going to frown upon and get really upset. Here's a big thing to note about this. This car is just a prototype, NASCAR is not committed completely to going fully electric, and they're not going to be going fully electric anytime soon. Even NASCAR's executive vice president, one of the SVPs, John Probst of competition, said that NASCAR is committed to combustion engines going forward. But they also have to keep their eyes open, especially with the governments, among other things, which I entirely agree. They have to keep their eyes open. Look, I think NASCAR knows that if they just went completely electric and basically went to this, I think a lot of fans would turn off and move away from NASCAR. Now, one of the cool things of this electric car is it's going to have 1,000 kilowatts, which also means it's going to be 1,300 horsepower on the engine. That is a lot of horsepower. Geez, I wish we could go ahead and put some of that horsepower in the current Cup car on the short tracks. That's double of what the current Cup Series car currently has on every type of track, except on the super speedways. Again, I think it's cool that they've unveiled this prototype, and as a prototype itself, and for what I saw, I don't really like the sound, but I love that there's 1,300 horsepower on this car. I think that's absolutely incredible. Now, could this in the future end up being used as a series? Maybe. I wouldn't count it out, but it's not going to replace the Cup Series. It's not going to replace the Xfinity Series. It's not replacing the Truck Series. Hell, it's not even going to be replacing ARCA anytime soon. So I think people need to calm down a little bit. It's just a prototype. That's all it was. And they did some test laps today as well. Remember, they're supposed to actually do test laps earlier this year at the Coliseum, but because of the major weather and a huge storm that came through the area, they were not able to go ahead and do that. So I really hope people understand that NASCAR is just testing it currently at the moment. Again, we do know that Dana White is involved very heavily on this prototype and project. And one big thing with this prototype, if there's a new series that comes in the future, this could lead to new manufacturers coming in. Dodge could make a comeback in the future. Honda, we know they're heavily interested. They could leave IndyCar at the end of this year and make a jump into NASCAR. There is certainly a chance that they could join in the near future because their contract with IndyCar, I believe, ends at the end of next year or 2026, and they could come to NASCAR as early as 2026 if they leave. You could have new manufacturers coming, which I think would be really huge for the sport, and I think a lot of fans should really like that. We'll have to wait and see what happens and what decisions are made going forward, but we all know right now that they're not bringing this in as a new series. It's just a prototype, so keep that in mind. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Noah Gragson. Now, Noah Gragson was speaking to media this past weekend at the Chicago Street Course, and he says that he's very close to announcing his 2025 NASCAR Cup Series plans. He says he's expected to be in the NASCAR Cup Series next year, and he did reveal that his decision for 2025 will be revealed in the next week or two, according to what he told the media this past week. Noah Gragson is one of the two remaining Stewart-Haas drivers that are currently free agents. Chase Briscoe will be driving the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing next year, and Josh Berry, it was announced this past week, will be driving the number 21 car for the Wood Brothers in 2025. Noah Gragson's been having a very solid year in the NASCAR Cup Series, and he does bring a little sponsorship and funding with him as well from Bass Pro Shops and Winchester and a couple other companies like Black Rifle Coffee as well. So the big question is, what teams can Noah Gragson end up heading to in 2025? Well, there's two organizations that Noah Gragson has been linked to. One of those is Richard Childress Racing. RCR has been rumored to potentially have a 3-car organization in 2025 with 3 full-time entries. But the one thing that could hurt that possibility and the opportunity from happening is they're going to need a 3rd charter for that to end up happening. And we know charters are still unknown if charters are going to be around next year because the charter negotiations and agreement are still going on as we speak. We saw a video come out. We're talking about some of these charter negotiations, and they're still going on behind the scenes. So we don't know if RCR is going to be able to get that 3rd charter. We thought they were going to be getting one of the SHR charters, but we know the Haas factory team sticking around. We know that Cole Custer is most likely going to be the driver. So that leaves one organization that he could end up with, and the organization I think he's going to end up with is Front Row Motorsports. Front Row Motorsports is expected to unveil their plans here in the coming weeks, and we know there's 2 rides currently open at Front Row Motorsports. Sam Mayer and Christian Eckes are in conversations to potentially join this team going into 2025, that being Front Row, but Noah Gragson has been linked to Front Row as well. if you have Noah Gragson with front row, I think he brings a lot of success. And I think Noah Gragson would do a great job. He's going to have tier 1 support from forward. We know a lot of the SHR employees are expected to go over there. And Drew Blickenserver, who, by the way, at one point was a crew chief for Front Row Motorsports back in the day, he'd be reuniting potentially with front row because we know a bunch of the SHR guys are going over. That being said, they're not moving into one of the SHR shops. But if Noah Gragson goes to front row, I think he's going to have a chance for a top 20, top 25 season. I think he gets some top 10s, and I think he might get a couple occasional top 5s as well. But I truly hope that Noah Gragson ends up with a really good team, and I think front row is really potentially going to reach that level where they are a championship level team in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think Noah Gragson would be the perfect candidate to go over there next year. He's got sponsorship with him, and if he goes to a 34 car, which he's heavily linked to his 34 car, he may not need to bring as much sponsorship because Love's Travel Stop, I think, is going to be sticking around with this team in 2025 as well, which I think Love's they've been committed with front row for about a decade or so. So I don't think they're going to be leaving anytime soon. There were rumors they were going to be following Michael McDowell over to Spire, but they're expected to stay with front row next year. We'll see what ends up happening, but it sounds like Noah Gragson is likely going to be leaving. So we've seen before, and will be likely going over to Front Row Motorsports in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR's silly season. Now, I've talked about silly season on the channel quite a bit, but earlier this week, Bob Poggers put out a very interesting and a very good updated article after Josh Berry was officially announced to the Woodburns. And he talked about some drivers that we're going to talk about a little bit later as well, but also talk about some drivers who could be on the move and moving to different organizations in 2025. The first team we talked about was 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing is expected to have a 3-car organization in 2025. Tyler Reddick is going to stay in the 45 car next year since he's committed for multiple years. Bubba Wallace, while he's not announced a multi-year extension with the team yet, Bubba Wallace is expected to stick around and drive the 23 car in 2025, and we know he's expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with 2311 Racing. The third car is currently up in the air between two drivers, Riley Herbst and Corey Heim. Riley Herbst has been rumored to be going to third 2311 because of the monster money that he has in the Terrible Herbst Branding and Company as well, because his family owns the Terrible Herbst Branding. They've been rumored to potentially have bought up that third charter for 2311. But Corey Heim is a reserve driver, so they have a really tough choice to make between Riley Herbst and Corey Heim. I think there's a really good chance, possibly, that they're going to end up picking Riley Herbst because of the funding he brings, but I would love to see Corey Heim be the driver behind the wheel of his third car in 2025. Let's now move over to the Chevrolet camp. Trackhouse Racing is also expected to have 3 cars in 2025. Shane Van Gisbergen is currently the frontrunner to get that third seat. So what does this mean for Zane Smith? Well, there's 2 possibilities of organizations that Zane Smith could end up with. One of those is Colleague Racing. Colleague Racing is still expected to have 2 cars in 2025, despite the fact at one point there have been rumors, speculation that Colleague Racing was going to go ahead and end up selling a charter at the end of this year and maybe sell it to Trackhouse. Zane could potentially go to the 31 car. He does have some sponsorship and funding with him, and we can see a possibility of finding a way for Trackhouse to still have an association with this team as well. The other one, shockingly, is Front Row Motorsports. Front Row is going to have a 3-car team next year. We talk about Noah Gragson being a lead candidate for one of those rides. Zane Smith going back to Front Row is definitely possible. That's another team that has been mentioned for Zane Smith going into next year. Speaking of Front Row Motorsports, we already talked about this with Noah Gragson. He's a lead candidate for the 34. The 2 drivers that are in potential to go to this team as well are Sam Mayer and Christian Eckes. Sam Mayer has been killing it in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year, has been a championship threat the last couple of months. He's been winning a lot of races as of late. Sam Mayer is a lead candidate to potentially head over there in 2025, plus he does have a little bit of funding with him as well. Christian Eckes has also been doing a really good job in the Truck Series, has been tearing it up, just had a really dominant performance last week at Nashville Super Speedway and was extremely impressive. So Christian Eckes could go there as well. It's between those 2 for the third seat. If Sam Mayer does move up the front row next year, not Christian Eckes, Connor Zilisch is likely going to take over the one car in Xfinity. We know Connor Zilisch is currently in talks to go full-time with Junior Motorsports in 2025, and I think he'd be a really good pickup for Junior Motorsports going into next season. It sounds like Connor Zilisch is in heavy talks conversations to be full-time with Junior Motorsports. As for Junior Motorsports, they're not buying a charter as of now. They could in the future go Cup racing, but at this current moment, they're not planning to buy a Cup Series charter. Let's now transition back over to the Ford camp. Ryan Preece, we know, will be one of the only guys that might not be in Cup next year. There's some rumors of him going to the Haas factory team in 2025, but there's also rumors he potentially could go to Rick Ware Racing. Justin Haley is still expected to return to Rick Ware Racing and expect he's going to stick with them next year, despite rumors of him maybe going to the Wood Brothers at one point, though that's not happening with Josh Berry's signing. We do know that Ryan Preece could go to Haas factory, but he also could go to Rick Ware as well. And then finally, Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton is expected to potentially head back to Xfinity and go to the Haas factory team. He's looking for a ride going into next year. And many, like I said, has speculated that Harrison Burton is going to go ahead and move back to the NASCAR Xfinity Series, where he's going to try to rebuild his image and rebuild his NASCAR career. I think he'd be a really good pickup to move up in the future to Cup, but I think it's also not a bad decision to go back to Xfinity and try to perform there. Silly season is going to be developing as time progresses and goes on. There's some announcements potentially coming in the not-so-distant future, and I think it's going to be very interesting to follow the rest of the silly season as it goes on. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what ends up coming out in regards to the silly season in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, we've talked about Shane Van Gisbergen a lot in this episode and a lot on this channel in recent weeks. The big reason is because about his future. Last week, he spoke to the media, and actually before the Chicago weekend started, he spoke to the media, and he is hoping to be in the NASCAR Cup Series full-time in the 2025 season. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk and speculation. I talked about it a second ago, but Trackhouse is looking at 3 cars in 2025. And we know, and according to what Justin Marks told Daniel Trotta this past week and Larry McReynolds as well, they're looking to make an announcement on their team in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Ross Chastain is currently committed, they think, till 2026 or 2027. And Daniel Suarez, despite not having a contract signed at this point, is expected that Daniel Suarez is going to sign a contract extension. That leaves Shane Van Gisbergen, who will likely go to a third seat. And many of you are going to be asking, do you think he should be full-time at Cup next year? Absolutely 100%. I think the win in the Xfinity Series race this past weekend really proved it. He is currently the winningest driver in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition with 3 wins this year, which is the most of anybody in the Xfinity Series field. The other reason why I think he deserves to be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series is because he's been getting better on ovals. In the many races we've ran on ovals, he has only had 3 or 4 finishes outside of the top 20. Let's look at some of those outside finish top 20s. Las Vegas, that was because of an engine failure. Talladega, ran out of fuel. And then, of course, what happened at COTA, he got that penalty, which I think was one of the biggest BS penalties. And let's be real and honest, he should have won that race at Circuit America because he was on a runaway to get it done and would have absolutely easily won that race at Circuit of the Americas. And then the last race at Iowa was really the only race where he's made a mistake so far, but sometimes you go ahead and learn from some of those mistakes you end up making. And he's been getting better. He's made mistakes at times, but also in the Select Cup Series starts he's ran. Like I know today, Chicago did not go well for him, but I think that today is a learning process. But then again, he got taken out and dominated the early portion and was easily probably going to run away. I know Chris Bell had given a run for his money, but he's been doing a really good job in the Cup Series, in Xfinity Series this year. And again, you got to look at the sponsorship and funding side of things too. He's got WeatherTech sponsoring him. Red Bull, maybe in the future we see them potentially sponsor him if he does run full-time at Cup next year. And what about, like, of course, Wendy's? Wendy's has a big association with him recently. I'd love to see them potentially work more sponsorship. It seems like Wendy's cursed at the Chicago Street Course for a reason because Noah Gragson got cursed in the event. But I think that SVG absolutely 100% needs to be full-time with Trackhouse next year. And I think if you put him full-time, because I don't think he's going to learn much more in Xfinity. He's already won 3 races. He's a good road racer. And he just doesn't have to go out there and win a million damn races, right? He just needs to go out there and learn and get better as a driver in the sport. And I think if you put him full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series next year, I think he's absolutely going to earn it. If he goes full-time next year, my prediction is with Trackhouse, because I think the team's going to get better next year, is I think he's going to win around 1 or 2 races. I think he easily makes the playoffs and has a chance for a top 10. And keep this in mind, too. With how well he ran to Chicago, he's almost back inside the top 10 in the standings. If you get inside the top 10 in the points, that's extra playoff points for him. I don't think he's going to be winning the Xfinity Series title by any stretch of imagination this season, but I do think that SVG will be a solid threat and contender to have a chance at maybe getting some wins in Cup next year. Trackhouse definitely does have some work to do, and they've got some progress they really need to make, but I do think that Shane Van Gisbergen will be a really good asset. If I was Trackhouse, I'd have him replace Daniel Suarez, and Suarez be on the way or going to college, but personally, I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is ready to make the jump up the Cup. He's been doing a really good job this year. He's a really talented race car driver. He always gets the best out of equipment. He does an amazing job, gets better on a week-by-week basis, and I really hope, especially after how well they've been performing, I really hope that, and Justin Marks embrace him every time he wins. I really hope and pray that Justin Marks and Trackhouse make the right decision and they move SVG up. Are they going to? Who knows at this point? But like I said, I truly hope and pray that Shane Van Gisbergen is a NASCAR Cup Series driver full-time, because I truly believe that he's earned the right and I think he deserves to be full-time in Cup in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, we've been talking quite a bit on the channel over the course of the last 2 weeks about Hailie Deegan. And the reason is because of the fact that there's been a lot of talk and speculation in recent weeks that Hailie Deegan will no longer be driving for AM Racing. Well, Bob Pocker spoke to multiple people from AM Racing this past weekend, and they said that they're basically going to be making a decision on her future here very, very soon. And very recently, I did a little bit of checking, and she no longer is following AM Racing on Instagram. Now, a lot of people talk about the fact that she kind of had AM Racing in her Twitter bio, but from what I've seen people say as well, that basically she never had them in her bio to begin with, and she hasn't updated her truck photo to her Xfinity car in nearly 3 years. Hailie Deegan had been driving for AM Racing the whole entire season, and she had generally struggled, unfortunately, this year. In the 15 or 16 races she ran this season, she only had 4 top 20 finishes altogether. Now, Joe Logano got behind the wheel of the number 15 car this past weekend, and he struggled in practice, didn't run really well, finished in 26 in practice. But he qualified inside the top 15 and finished in 8th position. That being said, from what people have been saying, the radio communication wasn't the greatest, and maybe the team has a lot of things to work on. That being said, if people really expected a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion to not outperform Hailie Deegan, that would have been a really bad look on her, and it would have been a great look on her part if Joe Logano had ran 30th all day and she was running like 20th. Now, some people said that she probably would have made the field, or not made the field, I should say, and that certainly is definitely possible. But Joe Logano, while he did finish 8th, really never had the pace or speed. So I don't completely think it is Hailie Deegan altogether. That being said, Hailie Deegan was definitely a major part of the problem. I think it's fair to say that Hailie Deegan was absolutely, if it's true that she's out of AM Racing, I think it's fair to say that Hailie Deegan was not ready to make the jump up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series at all. Look, I think we all saw that really strong performance at Las Vegas Motor Speedway a few years ago, and I was kind of saying that she's ready to make the move up, because I think she would have learned a lot more in the NASCAR Xfinity Series than she did in the Truck Series, which the Truck Series at the time, to be fair, was a little bit of a wreck fest. But every car that the truck she's been into since she joined Ford is, I think, one of the biggest things that really hurt her NASCAR career is when she decided to leave Toyota and go to Ford. Because there were rumors back in 2019 that she's going to make some select Xfinity starts or even truck starts if JGR opened up a truck program, that she was going to make select starts with that organization and team. Hailie Deegan went to Ford, and there weren't really a lot of good rides that were available. And I think it really hurt her career. And I think Ford really wanted to move her up super quickly. Now, from what I understand, Hailie Deegan still has technically a development contract with Ford through, I believe, the 2026 season, but I could be entirely wrong. Look, I like Hailie Deegan a lot, and I've praised her sometimes, and I've done videos on her on this channel where I have praised her performance, but she has not done a really good job the last couple of years. I think that's fair to say, and it sucks to see, and I think a lot of us really wanted Hailie Deegan when she joined NASCAR altogether. We wanted her to succeed, because she is good for the sport if she ends up succeeding. But when you're getting outperformed by your teammates and people are outperforming you that aren't running full time, like Matt DiBenedetto, who's only ran 12 races this year, like Eric Almirola, who's 27 points ahead of her, like Kyle Sieg, who's only ran 14 races, she's not that much doing much better than other drivers, and there's drivers behind her in owners' points, like the Hendrick cars only ran 5 or 6 races that I think is ahead of her in the owners' points currently at the moment, and they've only ran 6-7 races. That's a pretty big ouch right there. And you look at the previous driver who drove that car, Brett Moffitt. Brett Moffitt did a really solid job with AM Racing last year, but you have to remember Brett Moffitt is definitely a better driver than Hailie Deegan. So if Hailie Deegan is truly out of AM Racing, what are they going to do? Are they going to bring Cup Series drivers in? That certainly could be a possibility. I could definitely see them bring Joe Logano back for a few races. Maybe they bring Ryan Blaney, and maybe they find a way to give Team Penske support. Or maybe you get Brett Moffitt back on the team and organization. I think Hailie Deegan would have definitely done a little bit of a better job with AM if she did have a veteran teammate to work with her. I think that's a fact. I think if she had a veteran teammate that could have been there to help her, I think it really would have helped her. But the problem is they didn't have the veteran support. Maybe they could have gotten like Carl Edwards at her time or Kurt Busch to go over their help. But Kurt's driving Tronium 311, so that wasn't really going to happen. But I really don't know what exactly you do for her at this point. Do you go back and run the truck series? That could certainly be an option. Could you go run part-time with a team like that Haas factory team next year? That could certainly be a possibility. But I really don't know where Hailie Deegan's future is going to be lying at. But I truly think Hailie Deegan is officially going to be out of AM Racing. And like I said, it's really unfortunate for her career because I think at this point, if this truly is the end of her deal, driving for AM Racing, it is going to be super and really, really unfortunate, and I really don't know where her career is going to end up going. I hope that she released a statement on this situation, kind of clearing this up, but I do think her time with AM Racing is unfortunately going to be coming to a close at the end, and I think AM Racing's got some really tough decisions to make. I think they saw well Joey Logano perform, and I think that really made their decision. I think we're probably going to know here very soon that she has parted ways with AM Racing. It's a tough situation for her. I do feel a little bad for her because I think the team's got some work they need to do, but at the same token, same time, she should have been doing a lot better, and maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have been in this position where she's unfortunately losing her ride. But unfortunately, it looks like Hailie Deegan is no longer going to be driving for AM Racing going forward. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Link description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think Hailie Deegan is going to stay in NASCAR going forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Shane Van Gisbergen is a Cup driver next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There shouldn't be more videos dropping on the channel today. Tomorrow we're likely going to have the Truck Series race picks dropping. If the schedule does release tomorrow, we'll have a video breaking that down here on this channel. And we'll also have some other videos dropping this week as well as we take you guys to Pocono. We've got Xfinity Series race picks dropping for this week and then Cup Series race picks on Thursday. Got a ton of great content that I cannot wait for you guys to check out in the next couple of weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.